Are we live? Yes, we are. Okay. Thanks, everyone. If you can make your way back and take a seat. There are a number of seats down at the front. That's fantastic. I know it's really hard dragging you away from the perfect temperatures out there. It was all planned. It's been fantastic to see you all chatting, networking, enjoying yourselves. That's really what these days are all about, isn't it? It's about getting some energy going, about things that you've been meaning to have a conversation with somebody and I've never found the time, so it's great. So welcome back, everyone, after lunch to our afternoon session, another action-packed session. I've heard lots and lots of feedbacks from the breakout groups. Really, really great to hear. Everybody was so energized. Lots of takeouts that we'll put together and think about how we can make sure we don't lose that energy from today. So thank you for all your participation in them. So our first speaker this afternoon is well known to many of us in the room. I think it's now officially Professor Claire McNaught. She has recently become a professor in her old alma mater of Aberdeen. And she's got many titles. I won't read out them all, but most importantly to us, she's one of our consultant surgeons specialising in colorectal surgery. And since 2025, she has been president of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. And that is an amazing accolade in itself. But in its over 500-year history, she's the first female president of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. So I definitely think that. And we've had a few trailblazers in women in surgery, but Claire is definitely up there with the best. So over to you, Claire, for your presentation.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Thanks for that kind introduction. Great to be here, everyone, and hopefully I'm going to try and keep you awake for the next 20 minutes or so. So when Jackie asked me to come and do this, I said, of course I'm going to come and speak to my colleagues at Harrogate, because I'm a very, very proud member of the community here. Although the number of people who have said to me today, do you still work here, has been, I was like, yes, and thank you to the Trust for supporting me in this role. So what I thought I'd do, just a bit of fun, is really to take you a walk through history from where we started off 200 years ago in medicine to where we are now, and perhaps to where I think we might be going in the near future. Now, it has a bit of a surgical slant on it, so of course you'll have to forgive me because that's my passion, but I hope you'll enjoy this. So let me take you back to 1826, and this is the Harrogate Bath Hospital you see here. So what was life like in 1826? Well, it was very different and very tough. So the average life expectancy in Harrogate was 40 at that time. 1 in 4 infants would not reach the age of 1. If you made it to 20, you were likely to maybe get into your 60s or early 70s. But overwhelmingly, the most common cause of death was infection. But of course, there was no antibiotics, and TB in particular. And actually, if you'd pitched up to the Bath Hospital with an infection, you wouldn't be admitted. They'd send you home because there really was nothing that they could do for you in that stage. And what was surgery like back in 1826? Well, it was pretty barbaric, to be honest. People had a lot of fear for surgery. And this surgeon you see here is a chap called Robert Liston, and he was definitely probably the most preeminent surgeon of his day at that time. You can imagine there was no anaesthesia, so people were basically, the patient would come into the operating theatre, and it was called a theatre because you can see all those people standing around him. That's what it was. It was a theatre, lots of onlookers. People would hold the patient down, so surgery had to be really quick and really fast because the patient, had to be able to withstand it for a very short period of time. So blood-stained aprons, there was no antisepsis there, and about 1 in 4 people would die on the table, but many died after of infection or of blood loss. But there's a really great story about Robin Liston, is that he's the only surgeon to ever have a 300% mortality rate from an operation. Right? So it makes me feel better about my practice. So basically, he was doing an amputation. The patient on the table sadly died. He managed to cut his assistant whilst he was doing this amputation, and they subsequently developed sepsis and died. And one of the onlookers collapsed and had a cardiac arrest. So there you go. Definitely need a day text for that one, yeah? Okay. But what was absolutely fabulous about the 19th century when our hospital was first built was it's a time of great innovation. And that's where all the sort of innovations that allow modern surgery today really started. And I'm going to take you through just a couple of the sort of, perhaps the key innovations that happened over that period of time. And I'm going to start with this chap, Louis Pasteur. You've all heard of pasteurisation, yeah? So he was a French chemist, and he worked out, he was really in the food industry initially. He worked out that there was association with these microorganisms and how alcohol, etc., was fermented. And he developed pasteurisation, and he really apparently saved the French wine and silk industry because he realised that the bad organisms at that time that were causing the problems. But he was also the first to try a bit of vaccination. He would take a very small amount of these organisms that he found and actually started vaccinating people. And it was really the start of immunology as we know it today. Now, just after he was in practice, along came this chap called Robert Koch, because he was actually from German, and he was really probably the start of microbiology. And he actually was one that coined the sort of germ theory of disease, because remember, infection was was the key killer of this time. And he actually developed all the laboratory techniques, many of which we still use today in plating out organisms. He actually started to identify them, and he actually discovered the cause of TB, which was by way and far one of the largest causes of death at this time. And then came Simpson and the advent of anaesthesia, and this is probably the start of starting to see surgery becoming more and more practice. So Simpson was a really bright guy. He went to Edinburgh University at the age of 14, and he was actually an obstetrician by practice. Now, a year earlier, in 1846, a couple of American obstetricians had discovered ether, but ether wasn't very nice to use. So what did Simpson do? Well, he got all his pals round for a dinner party, right? And then they got a whole bunch of volatile chemicals, and they actually worked out which ones knocked you out, yeah? I'd love to say the science of anaesthesia has moved on since then, but I don't think it has actually. But anyway, sorry for the nieces in the room. Anyway, he found this, and so they started using chloroform. But when he started using it in his obstetric practice, the clergy really condemned him, saying it's some sort of witchcraft, and he shouldn't be doing that because women should have pain during labour. And it wasn't until that he used it on Queen Victoria that it became in common use throughout the country, and then it was adopted rapidly worldwide. Now, when it comes to surgeons, I suppose my surgical hero, looking back through history, was this chap, Joseph Lister, the father of what we call of antiseptic surgery. And if anybody's really interested in surgical or medical history, there's a great book that came out a couple of years ago called The Butchering Art that takes you through really what medicine was like in Victorian times, just really when our hospital was first opened. So he was the son of a Quaker, and he was actually present at the very first general anaesthetic operation done in this country, which was performed by Lister. But he was also, he was aware of the work that Pasteur was doing, and he thought, well, maybe there's something in this. And he started thinking, well, actually, rather than have all these blood-stained aprons, let's start cleaning them, let's wash our hands, let's use carbolic acid to sort of clean it and sterilise our instruments. And then he published this paper in 1967 in The Lancet that showed that he could reduce his death rate from people with compound fractures, infected fractures, from 45% to 15%. So, of course, then surgery then started to become acceptable. But he wasn't a particularly nice guy, and he used to really annoy his colleagues. So a lot of what his teachings didn't really get adopted for about 20, 30 years worldwide because people were trying to undermine him. As we often see when new innovations come due, we're a bit suspicious, but he did eventually get there. Now, despite what the surgeons might tell you, it's not all about us, okay? It's actually, we know that to do good surgery, you have to have a whole team working together. And the nursing side of things is very important. And of course, in that time of history, Florence Nightingale came into her own. Now, she was actually born to a very wealthy family in Britain and was brought up. And when she went into the nursing profession, they were kind of fairly horrified by this. But she was she wanted to do this. And she was she really revolutionised nursing. And she was actually out in the Crimea looking after soldiers, and she realised that actually her patients weren't dying of their wounds, they were dying because they were malnourished and they were living in terrible conditions. And she really pushed the governments to address this. And of course, she's called the Lady of the Lamp because she was actually known, she was very, very dedicated. She used to go around and do her ward rounds at night with a lamp, and that's why you get that saying about her. But she opened the first nursing school in St Thomas's 1860, about 40 years after our first hospital opened. And then, so things are starting, so we're starting to do surgery, we've got nursing getting a bit better, and then came medical diagnostics, and this is probably the start of medical diagnostics, just again at the turn of the century. So William Röntgen, he was a physicist, and he was just one day playing with a cathode tube. That's what you do, apparently, if you're a physicist. And he noticed that on a screen, he could see some sort of fluorescence, and he thought, wait a minute, this tube's, is obviously giving out some, what he called radiation, he called them X-rays. And so he then really discovered that actually you could actually put this through objects and actually see inside. And this is the very first X-ray that was ever taken, which is his wife's hand. She was called Bertha, and you can see her wedding ring. Now, he was a really good guy. In fact, he decided not to take. He could have made a fortune from this, but he decided not to do this. He didn't patent it. He just felt that everybody should have that scientific knowledge. And so X-rays went global really within about a decade of them being invented. And of course, it really was the start of medical diagnostics that we know today. Now, the other big complication of surgery, as you know, is blood loss. And up until about the 1900s, you know, if you had a blood transfusion, people recognised that some people were fine, some people got very severe reactions, and some people actually died after giving people blood, and they couldn't really understand it. But it was this physician in Vienna who worked it out. You know, he did something really simple. He just took some blood samples from patients and he mixed them to see what happened. And the ones that didn't react, he basically identified that there was 3 main blood groups. A really, really simple thing. And in fact, that his technique of blood matching, again, was rapidly adopted across the globe. And he probably saved more lives than you know, very, very many people coming before him. It's an incredible chap. And his team actually then found there was actually a 4th AB blood group. And then after the war, the First World War, he went over to America and discovered rhesus factor. So he really was a pioneer in the world of immunology. But again, that changed the world for surgery. But if I was to pick one thing that made the biggest impact on medicine as we know it today, it's this: antibiotics and penicillin. Because without them, we couldn't do anything that we do today. And this is Alexander Fleming. So he was born in Ayrshire, which is where my family are from, and he was a bacteriologist. And during the First World War, he saw that the majority of soldiers died of sepsis. So he was very interested in this. And what happened, he actually went on holiday. This is how he found penicillin. He went on holiday, he plated out some Staph aureus, and he'd left a window open, and one of his pals in the lab below was playing with moulds. Anyway, when he came back from holiday, he saw that a mould had got itself into the plate, but there was a kind of an area around the mould that wasn't growing Staph aureus. It had killed it off, and he called that substance that the mould were giving out called penicillin notatum. And so he thought, wait a minute, and this was the first antibiotic. Now, it took about a decade to get mass production of this. Antibiotics didn't really come into common use until World War II. And then just after that, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. But there's no doubt, without antibiotics, we couldn't do joint replacements, we couldn't have transplantation, we couldn't really do most of the surgeries we do today, or most of the medicine we do today. But even then, even at the very beginning, Fleming did warn about the risks of antibiotic resistance. And it is a big risk, because if we don't do something about this, then I'm telling you, we'll have to stop a lot of the things that we're already doing. It won't be safe. So you can see we are built on these shoulders of giants. We've gone from this very rudimentary barbaric surgery to what I was trained in, this very highly complex open surgery that was sort of in the 90s. And now we're moving on to the laparoscopic and the robotic era. And I'm going to come back to that in just a little minute. But apart from the sort of evolution of our technology, there's also been an evolution of our workforce. So if you go before the war, it was white men were the physicians and the medical men. And it wasn't until 1920, you see that lady there, that's Alice Hedworth Hunter. She was actually born in India. Her father was an officer in the British Army. She came back and she got her FRCS and became a surgeon, but she couldn't get a job to work in this country because she's a woman. So she actually went back to India and actually spent her whole career working as a surgeon in India, and was actually awarded a very prestigious award by the Indian government for all her services. So she was the first woman thus qualified. But particularly over the last 30, 40 years, we've seen a complete change in the ethnic diversification of our workforce, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've also now got this, what we call a multi-generational workforce. So there's poor Mr. Harrison. I did warn him that he was going to be in the picture. But, you know, we now, in our organisation, we have people working in their 20s with people who are working in their 70s. And, of course, that can cause some challenges, and we have to work with this. And then, of course, we now have the extended surgical team and extended roles. Here's Siobhan Richardson, one of our fantastic SCPs. We have 4 of them here in Harrogate. You know, they have added an awful lot of value. So our team have changed a lot over the time. Now, I can talk about all of those topics for hours, but I'm just going to concentrate on women in medicine, as I see it's a great interest in mine. So here's this lady I'm going to introduce you to. This is Sophie Jex Blake, and in 1869, she was the first of 7 women who went to Edinburgh Medical School. We call them the Edinburgh Seven. Now, after the first year, they went into Surgeons' Hall, which is where my college is held, and all the other male medical students didn't want them, so they threw mud at them. They got a live sheep and they stuck it in. I mean, that's what they did in those days to disrupt things, but kind of crazy. And they called that the Surgeons' Hall's riot, and that actually made national press. And in fact, Edinburgh University at that point said to them, "Look, we're not going to let you become doctors, we're not going to let you graduate." But there was a huge public outcry in this, and actually in 1876, the UK Medical Act came in, which allowed women to graduate as doctors, and that's where that came from. So at the turn of the century, 1900, 1% of doctors were women. In 2000, it was 33%, and actually just last year, for the first time, number of women on the GMC register outweigh men. So it's taken a long time to get there, but we've made great progress. We've made great progress in most specialities, because sadly surgery is still lagging behind. If you look at the UK workforce demographics, this is taken from the GMC workforce report, whereas most specialities have now reached gender parity, surgery is still lagging well behind. And that's the same in the rest of the world. This was some data I pulled out for a talk in Australia, but it was going to take 186 years to become gender neutral in orthopaedics. Does that surprise anybody in this room? But there you are. But although I do hear today that we have got our first woman coming, so that's fantastic. So that's really, really good. What made me laugh more was that there's this great quote in the paper this year, but there's more surgeons called David working in the private sector than there are women. So that's an absolutely true fact. So, so there are still some barriers there that I'm working very hard to overcome. So what I'm just going to briefly tell you roughly what I've been doing a little bit at our college. We have the most amazing heritage, and we have actually a great museum. So if you're ever in Edinburgh, please go. We're one of the 10 weirdest museums in the world, apparently, but we actually have the largest collection of human remains in the world. But anyway, if you walk into our college, there's 174 portraits, 171 of them are men, and we thought we have to deal with that. So last year we commissioned this fantastic portrait, which shows Alice Hedges-Hunter, our first fellow. The other lady in the picture is called Caroline Doig. She was our first council member in 1986. And these terrific 9 women there are all winners of what we call the Hunter-Doig Medal. These are absolutely exceptional young women who we have awarded a medal to in recognition of their contribution. And so that's what we did. But you might see in the picture there that the girl in the front's got a tie at the front, and so there's a really nice story about that. So Emma Stapleton, she's on council with me now. She went to do an examination. She's a cochlear implant surgeon. She's got an internationally renowned. She's fantastic. But she went to do an examination, and she was given, and the men were given ties, the male examiners, and she said, "Well, what am I getting?" There was nothing for her, right? And so she said, "Well, I want a tie." So she said, "I'm going to wear this tie." So she did, she wore it. So anyway, one of my other colleagues has now done these little tartan bows. We saw Kate with them last year at Wimbledon and thought, okay, that sounds nice. And she's done this lovely bit of modern arts called Turning the Tide, which is just showing that actually now that we are starting to change how we view women and recognise them. As a college, I'm not going to dwell on this, but we've done a lot of work about the very poor behaviours that and unfortunately surgeons always top the poor professional behaviours and misconduct levels, and so we have tried to deal with that. We've done a national campaign, and we've changed our code of practice, and certainly we have an absolute zero tolerance for that now. And we also support women through our leadership. We know that women don't tend to put themselves forward for leadership positions, so we do support them through our Leadership Fellows programme and through mentorship. So that's what I've been doing, but that's just to a side. So let's come right back to what we're doing here in Harrogate. So this is 1975. Now, don't you recognise that as Nidderdale ward there, you know? I think we should bring back the hats, what do you reckon? Yep, should we do it? Yeah, it's good. I mean, isn't it beautiful? And that's Princess Margaret, of course. She came to open the hospital in 1975, and that's what it looked like then. It's amazing. But since then, we've kind of moved on in terms of surgical techniques, and of course, we've moved very much into the laparoscopic era. Probably the theatre staff who are here today will know that almost all cases are done with a laparoscope at the moment. This was actually discovered by a gynecologist from Germany who used to just use it just diagnostically to look into pelvises of women who had maybe infertility problems. But actually, he was very innovative, developed lots of instruments, and he did the first laparoscopic appendicectomy in 1980. It wasn't that long ago, was it really, you know? And in fact, the first lap Coley was done in 87, you know, really, and certainly in time I qualified. So it's amazing how much that's gone on to be accepted. And I think we're actually in the same phase at the moment as we come into the robotic era. You know, that's starting to roll out this technology that initially people are saying, I'm not sure we're going to get involved with that. But I can tell you, Jonathan, that actually this is a future. this is where we're going, whether we like it or not. This is going to, and in fact, even our Secretary of State says that they want to have at least 90% of operations performed robotically in the next decade. Now, I think that's maybe pushing it too far, but this is what's going to have to happen, and it's great that I saw Intuitive were here today with a robot, and just to show what it can do. But there's over 1 million robotic surgeries performed globally. The UK are falling behind compared to our international companions, and it's something we have to get on. Now remember, people always call it robotic assisted surgery. At the moment it's the surgeon is doing the surgery, we are controlling the robot, but I think that in time to come that might change. There's already been a couple of experimental studies in animals that a robot has fully performed that, and so that's something to see. What will happen in the future, who knows. But this is where I think we're actually living at the most exciting time in medicine in lots of ways, because we're actually entering the era of what I call personalised medicine. So when you turn up as a patient, oh yeah, okay, we've got patient treatment pathways, but in fact it's getting so much more specific than that. So for example, as a rectal cancer surgeon, if a patient comes in, we'll take a biopsy of your cancer, we look at its genetics, we will be able to work out what chemotherapies you're going to respond to and which ones you're not. So we're not going to expose you to treatments that are not going to do you any good. We'll be able to go straight in with what's going to be effective. And by doing that, hopefully we can, rather than do big radical operations, we can do minimally invasive surgery and try and improve your outcome. So the things that are happening in genomics, immunology, drug development, I think are just astonishing at the moment. The problem is as an NHS is how do we afford all of that? But personalised medicine is where we're going. So I'm going to take you right back to where we started today in 1826. And I always remember Arthur C. Clarke, who's a sci-fi writer from the 50s, said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If you were standing in 1826 today and seeing what we were doing now, you would think it was magic. It's absolutely, when you think how far we've come in 200 years, I think it's incredible. And I know sometimes we're talking a lot about at the present time about AI and how that's going to impact how we all work. And of course it will impact, and hopefully positively, how we work. But for me, I think at the end of the line, that medicine and the healthcare profession is all about human connection. Yeah, and a robot can't do that. So I think we're all going to be okay. So happy birthday, Harrogate Hospital. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's on fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire. It was in such a short period to tell us, where we've come, but where we still have work to do. And I think there was some hard-hitting messages there of areas that we need to keep working on, and we'll never stop. Claire's very kindly got some time for questions. If we have any from the audience, we have roving mics. But whilst you're all thinking, I've got one. So with all the advances, particularly in our surgical services, how can a smaller hospital like HDFT survive, continue to attract the bright and the best when there's a push for such specialised services? What's your thoughts on smaller district general hospitals?
So I've worked in even smaller hospitals than this, but so I actually don't think we're particularly small. In Scotland, Ninewells Hospital, which is a big teaching hospital in Dundee, probably serves the same population as we do. So it's about how you frame that. But there's always a bit about equity of services in the NHS, about people who can everybody in their region access that. In terms of robotics, at the moment it's expensive, but eventually this technology gets better, it gets smaller, then in fact the costs of that come down. And in terms of Harrogate, if we honestly want to continue as a surgical unit here, we have to invest in this technology, because it is the equipment, it's the tools of the future. Robert Liston, he just used a tourniquet and a knife, but now it's going to be the robot. The robot will be the new laparoscope, and we don't even think twice about a laparoscopic kit. But I remember laparoscopic kits being introduced into all hospitals, and it was like doing laparoscopy in the dark. The pictures were so terrible. The equipment we had initially was awful. But look how quickly and rapidly that evolved, and now we don't even think anything of it. So I think actually robotics will be the same. They'll be getting much smaller, much more mobile. You just wheel the robot in as you do a lap kit. So I think that the technology will take us there, and I think we have to stay up with it, to be honest.
Absolutely agree on that one. So we'll just empty your pockets on the way out, and we'll. But yeah, point well made. Any other questions for Claire? No,
They're all
you've
sleepy after
wowed them all. Oh, here we go. Got a question down at the front. Sorry, making you run, Claire. I was thinking there may be David's, but there's loads of Claires and Sarahs.
Oh, there is.
I was thinking we probably could...
You may have already done this, but there's the National Robotorium up in Edinburgh, and they've made contact with lots of different trusts, offering to work in partnership with people. So whilst they can't give funding, they can give support on how you evaluate robotics, so you choose the best one for you. Lots of other things they're offering as well. They've invited us to go up if we want to have a look on how robotics are being used in healthcare, this country, EU, Europe and America. Is that something you'd be interested in? Have you been approached by them yet?
So I mean, I work with all the robotics companies, so it's great to see Intuitive here, who are absolutely the market leader at the moment, but there's lots of other companies coming through, and at the moment, I think there's only about 7 companies that have been signed off as NICE approved at the present time, but again, that will change. It's a bit like, you know, as in 10 years' time, I suspect there'll be 100 robotic companies, and they'll all be in competition with each other, which again will bring the costs down. So I think that's what's going to happen. You know, sadly, in Scotland, what they did was, which I think was a better model, they actually nationally commissioned the robotics. They actually went out and got, I think, you know, half a dozen robots and put them in various centres, whereas we haven't had that national level of commission or input to that. It's all been left to individual organisations, which I think is a shame that actually, despite the push from a government level, they haven't actually gone in and we're talking about procurement today and sustainable procurement, that should have been probably procured nationally. That would have been much more sensible. But at the moment, I think that it is a changing environment. There's lots of companies out there, and I see that this technology is changing. You know, the robot you see there now is almost defunct. You know, the technology is rapidly changing. And I spend a lot of time, I'm going to China soon, but you know, you would not believe how far ahead they are now in terms of the robotic technology. So I think in the UK, I'm really worried that we're falling behind, and so I think it's got to be something we've got to get on our agenda, because we've always been leaders in education and in medicine, and I'd hate to see us lose that status, to be honest.
Thank you, Claire. Sarah?
Thanks, Claire. I just wondered what you thought were the key things that we can do to support ongoing gender balance in surgery and other specialties where opportunities still appear to lag behind for women. Thanks.
So I mean, obviously there's loads of research to that, and people choose their careers obviously because they choose it for their own personal ambitions, to match their family commitments and their priorities, and that's as it should be. But there's no doubt when you look at the surgical specialities, it's workplace culture across the board that actually makes people drop out. It's not the hours, it's not the perceived difficulty of the exams or actually the technical you know, acquisition of skills. It's workplace culture, and so we have to just keep on you know, banging that drum to say, you know what, everybody should be able to come to their work and actually have a nice experience. It's already stressful enough, but we need to be kind and considerate to each other. And I think that I think Dean said this morning, the standard you walk by is the standard you accept. You know, I think we have to be much better at just calling things out, and it can be just very subtle, like to say, actually, you know, did you realise that how you made that person feel today, or you know, even just put in the moment if you can, if it's a safe thing to do. Then actually you should call people out a little bit about the behaviour and just say actually just sit them down afterwards and say, this is how you made me feel when you said that to me. You know, because a lot of people actually don't actually realise that they're causing that kind of impression or harm to you, your psychological safety. And I think really sometimes just having that conversation, if you can do that. If you don't feel able to do that yourself, then you can ask perhaps maybe a colleague, another senior colleague, to do that on your behalf. So they're the kind of ways I would think. But we have to call it out and make sure that behaviour like that isn't normalised or accepted.
And it's not just for gender issues, as it is. Everyone has to feel that they belong in the NHS. Richard.
Claire, I thought I'd make it really personal. Do you remember your first surgery? How did that feel? And you know, when you actually went in first time, and how did that feel? And how do you avoid it feeling routine now?
It's a funny thing, isn't it? It's well, I remember the first operation I did myself, which was as a house officer. I was sent to do the appendicectomy. I think I'd seen one before because it was all the old good old days of see one, do one, teach one. You remember? You know, in some ways we could get it back. But I remember doing the first bit, and actually I managed it fine. But what I do remember is I lay awake all night because I had definitely in my head, I thought I must have caught the bill when I was stitching up the peritoneum. And for years I used to worry about that kind of thing. And then what happens is you gradually do more complex surgeries, you realise that you stop worrying about the lower level ones and start worrying about the more significant things. So it's a kind of it's an evolution. But what I would say, and I think that and something we really haven't got right recently, is that you don't really learn something until you have to do it yourself. And what we've done now is that we're not empowering our young clinicians to take that autonomy of practice, to take that responsibility, but that's how they learn. And I think we've become, I call it like the helicopter generation of consultants. We hover over everything our trainees are doing, and we don't trust them to take some risk and hold some of that risk, and they won't develop unless we do that. So, and that's our fault, actually. So we have to give them the opportunity to thrive, to be the clinicians of the future. We have to pass that risk back to them to let them thrive. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. And I did an appendicectomy once and became a rheumatologist. So just shows you. That's the richness of medicine. So many different specialties. We've got James Clare. Oh, and sorry, I think I can't see who it is at the back. Maybe they were first. We'll do James first. Okay.
Sorry, Dan. I also did an appendicectomy as a house officer, and probably not very well though. So my question was there about how we balance the much more of a drive compared to 25 years I've been qualified now, 25 years of risk aversion, harms and training and all that. I mean, the simulation offers a place to sort of fill some of that void, but like you say, when you've not got skin in the game, then the sort of learning takes on a very different sort of concept as to what it does when you're sort of doing it. So how do we balance that? Certainly with, you know, I'm a physician, so yours is much more of an apprenticeship than physicians, although there's some shared things there, but how would you see us balancing that with training when you talk about that?
So I think it's about having those supportive relationships. I think the reason why I could do things as a trainee is that I knew someone had my back. You know, that if it hadn't gone right, if it hadn't all gone well, you know, I would get told off, right? You know, but actually I knew that they would still have my back. And I think that what we've lost, I think, a little bit is those relationships, those supportive relationships where people are actually, you know, the training is good because we minimise mistakes, but you do have to let them go at some point. It's how you debrief people. It's getting away from a blame culture all the time and actually a much more learning environment. And actually, you know, or even doing it in incremental parts. Like James, let your registrar do, you know, let them do the ward round. It's easier to do it yourself, of course, it's easier to do it yourself, but let them stand back, let them do the ward round, and then debrief them afterwards and say, well, actually, you did this, which is maybe a reasonable thing, I might have done something different, and have that professional peer-to-peer discussion. But we've got to start getting that back into sort of normal training, and we've lost that a little bit. But I think the key is relationships, I think, between trainers and trainee.
Yeah, and it's applicable, I guess, in all health professions, isn't it? And probably pressure of time as well. And we have pressure of time, so we're going to do one. I think it's Dan, is it, at the back? Yeah, it's Dan.
Okay,
Hi, Claire. My question's actually about training as well, so that worked well. As you probably know, radiology has got a lot of AI in it already. We're one of the earliest areas to adopt AI in medicine. And one of the hottest topics for debate is the impact that has on training and, you know, the inability to now function without it, and trainees coming through who never had to work without AI. How do you think that's going to pan out for robotics in surgery?
Well, in a sense, at the moment, robotics is still just an instrument that a surgeon uses to do steps of the operation. In time, I think that it will be a bit more like it will be AI assisted in a sense that, you know, you'll be doing an anterior resection and your feedback will say 99.9% of surgeons would cut here next. You know, I suspect we are actually going to get to that level of autonomy. The problem is that who takes the risk, and I think that's where the human machine interface comes. I think that the risk will always lie with the human, to be honest, because we have the technology to have driverless cars, but everybody drove here today, yeah? It's not because we don't have the technology, it's because who judges the risk and who takes decisions. So I think the big risk with AI is that AI makes you stupid. right? There's really good evidence that there's a great study in MIT, in university. They took half their students and said, gave them a curriculum and said, you use AI, and then they gave the other half and said, you're not allowed to use AI. They did an exam at the end of the year, and guess who did better? The ones that didn't use AI, because they had to actually work out, they had to develop that critical thinking and that learning themselves. And so what we have to really be very wary when we're training anybody, any members of healthcare professions, is that we don't get to rely on it and we still question. Because if we don't do that, because AI makes mistakes, we know it does. Yeah, so we must always question. Yeah.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to close there because we do need to move on. But a big round of applause again for Claire. Thank you. And we probably could fill a whole conference day on AI, I suspect. But following on from that, and it's in the next title, can I have a warm welcome to Richard Stubbs, who is Chief Executive of Health Innovation for Yorkshire and Humber. He's a very well-known figure in innovation nationally, but also internationally. But importantly, a huge champion of the NHS, member of NHS Council, and has been regularly voted one of the top 50 BAME leaders in the NHS. So we're really, really lucky to have Richard today, who I know will give us an absolutely fantastic talk about the future of healthcare.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Unsurprisingly, I am also going to talk about AI for a bit. But yes, Claire's right. It does make you stupid. So, afternoon. Gosh, it goes a long way back, doesn't it? I'm Richard. Thanks, Jackie, for that. And thanks for inviting me. As Jackie said, I'm Chief Exec of Health Innovation Yorkshire and Humber. I'm genuinely delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a really amazing milestone in your history. As billed, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of healthcare. Spoiler alert, I don't have a crystal ball. I think, as Claire said, I think there's a really good point about the Arthur C. Clarke quote. If you look back 200 years at what's happening now, everyone would believe it was magic. I think you can't go much further than the next 5 to 10 years with any degree of certainty without moving into a sense of, in 15 years, 20 years, and particularly 30 years beyond, it should look like magic to us. I mean, who can say what it's going to be? I mean, I think if I could say, I'd be a rich man. So if you're here to know which big tech shares to buy, this is not the presentation for you, unfortunately. But what can we do when we're thinking about the future then? If we don't know what's going to happen, what can we do? I think what we can do is think about some of the radical change that's already happened in the last few decades within healthcare and indeed within our own lives. We can take a look at the emerging technology, which is certainly going to play a role in our future, and start to speculate about what the next 5 to 10 years may bring. Claire made this point as well, but science is moving at such a rate. I mean, you talked about the robot surgeons, which I completely agree with, that I think beyond that, we'll be kind of in the realm of those people in the 40s and 50s who said by the 60s we'd all be living a life of leisure because robots would be doing everything for us. And I don't think that's a very good predictive model. Although having just come back from China, I completely agree. We are so far behind. There were robots doing, and this is not just a healthcare setting, robots doing everything. I went to the BYD car production factory. It was all robots. Every hotel was staffed by robots. There were robots running around doing deliveries to rooms. And it was just normal. It wasn't an exhibition. That was just how China runs right now. I think most usefully, we can probably spend some time thinking about what is it we do now to make sure that we're ready and we're enabled to be able to benefit from the opportunities that undoubtedly are coming our way. So just a little bit about my work. So I'm part of what's called the Health Innovation Network. The short version is we're the innovation arm of the NHS. I think crucially, we're not part of research. We're here to accelerate the spread and the adoption of proven innovation into as many settings as possible. Something I say very often, but the NHS doesn't have an invention problem at all. We have when it comes to innovation, we have an adoption problem, and it's largely cultural. I was talking to Stuart earlier about this. Instead of looking for great ideas from elsewhere, we genuinely like to create and build our own, and it's understandable. I think it's human nature. But I think we do need to be more curious about all the great work that's happening elsewhere and think about how we can import that into our own processes before first thinking, shall we build something new? And that's kind of what the Health Innovation Network is here to foster. And it's not just about improving the health of our patients and our citizens, it's also about economic growth. So if we get this right, we help to not only have healthier patients and healthier populations, we create a vibrant health and life sciences sector that creates and sustains jobs. And that's really important up here in the north, more than anywhere else in the country. And you'll see from some of these stats that we don't just count the patients that we benefit. We count the hundreds of thousands of hours of healthcare time that we can free up, but also really dear to us, the investment that we leverage for UK PLC, as well as the thousands of jobs that adopting innovation helps to create every year. But you'll be pleased to know this is not a presentation about the Health Innovation Network. So if you do want to find out more about us and our priorities, we've just launched our new national prospectus, and there's a QR code there. I know we're going to share these slides, and Google will help you to find it, obviously. But if you haven't heard of us, then do look us up. That's an easy-to-read, fortunately short little brochure that just talks about our work to date and some of the stuff we'll be doing in 26-27. But I guess you'd expect me to say this as somebody who's passionate about stealing with pride rather than invention, but my version of the immediate future for the NHS isn't one where I'd expect to see some currently unimaginable, unproduced, to-be-designed technology that doesn't yet exist. It's actually one where we take the transformational, groundbreaking innovation that's already here, but it's here in tiny pockets, and we make it business as usual across the country. So imagine a future where every patient has an AI agent that knows their history, their medicines, their risks, their preferences, their appointments, and their care plan, where NHS decisions are informed not just by history, but by predictive insight, where policies can be tested virtually before being introduced, and where prevention is targeted, personalised, and evidence-driven, and where global expert on-demand surgery support is received by a connected, augmented surgical team powered by data, AI, and connected human expertise. As you can probably imagine, all that exists today is in use somewhere in the NHS today. So I'll just run through a few examples to illustrate what I'm talking about, and a lot of them are actually based here in Yorkshire. This is a great company called Stroll. They're currently in Leeds. They're using augmented reality to increase engagement, support progression, and help clinicians deliver effective neuro rehab. So Stroll's enabling clinicians to deliver up to 7 times more therapy with 2/3 less staff time. Patients report greater confidence, independence, and adherence to therapy programs as a result. We've also got Tetra. They use AI to help hospital teams to build the best surgical lists possible. It accelerates access targets, it reduces manual work, all without adding additional theatre capacity. That's in STH in Sheffield at the moment. They're currently piloting the Tetra platform within orthopaedics, and it helps their theatre teams to plan and fill elective surgery lists more effectively using data-driven predictions. In West Yorkshire, here in West Yorkshire, we've got our digital twin. That's a living, learning model. It mirrors how our real-world health system behaves over time using data. So it draws on continuously shared and updated data to simulate the future. It tests what-if scenarios before we make actual changes that affect patients and staff and services. So we're doing this, as I said, in West Yorkshire. We're doing it as the HIN, the Health Innovation Network, but we're doing it with our Integrated Care Board, our ICB, Kidney Research UK, Nexus. And we're currently working on kidney disease, but obviously, as you can imagine, this can be expanded to benefit any area of healthcare. But it's allowing us to test early detection strategies. It simulates outreach into underserved communities. It helps us to understand how transport, how workforce, how referral decisions interact. In short, it's a learning environment, and it's one that helps the NHS to learn before acting, but then act with far greater confidence. And this is a good friend of mine. If you want to identify a clinician who's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with technology, then I commend to you my friend, Professor Shafi Ahmed. This is Shafi, as you'd normally find him, in his medical metaverse. Here he's working with augmented reality. So Shafi's wearing a Microsoft HoloLens. That's allowing him to be in London, but he's working with surgeons in Mumbai. They're appearing to each other as holographic avatars. They're able to discuss cases in real time. They're viewing the same patient information. They could point at and annotate 3D holographic representations of scans and tumours and allow specialists to discuss anatomy and surgical approaches whilst the operation was on the way. And I was thinking while Claire was talking how I'd love to be able to bring one of those surgeons from 1826 into the room to show them what theatre can look like these days. Shafi's just published a book, and he would definitely want me to say, please go out and buy it today. But it is genuinely very good. You'll find it hard to find an unsigned version, but they're very rare. So it's not hard to imagine a future where we have AI highlighting critical anatomy in real time, digital twins of patients appearing as holographic models, global expert on-demand surgery support wherever you are on the planet, real-time language translation between international clinical teams, and then more precise and personalized procedures. And as I said, everything that I'm talking about is already in use somewhere in the NHS today. So when it comes to the future, I always come back to this William Gibson quote. You know, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. So let's get on to AI. So it goes without saying that our future model of healthcare is likely to be dominated by artificial intelligence. And I'm sure we'll get lots of questions and conversation going about this in a bit. I mentioned a few use cases today. We had a bit chat in Claire's Q&A as well. But I suppose what I would say, if you're thinking about beyond the next couple of years, is that the change that we're preparing for is not just about faster documentation or better image analysis. It's a move towards AI systems that can operate across multiple steps in a pathway. So we're not preparing for a slightly smarter chatbot. We're preparing for AI systems that can reason, that can plan, that can act, escalate, document, monitor, and learn across the whole patient journey. And what I'd point to as evidence about that is two big game changers. Agentic AI, and then when we finally manage to reach it, artificial general intelligence. So an AI agent could notice a patient's abnormal blood results. They could compare it with its history, check medication risks, draft a message to the GP, could request repeat testing, book follow-ups, alert a clinician, all before anybody's opened any inboxes. This is why it's potentially seismic. Our healthcare has always been organised around scarce human capital and expertise. What AI potentially gives us is it changes the economics of that expertise. It makes high-quality reasoning, pattern recognition, and administrative execution available at scale. So imagine every patient having an AI agent that knows their history, their medicines, their risks, preferences, appointments, care plans. It's able to spot their deterioration before the system does. It's able to translate medical language for them, prompt prevention, and escalate when needed. So the most powerful future is not AI replacing the consultant, but it may be AI distributing consultant-level reasoning to every ward, clinic, ambulance, care home, and patient's home, with humans supervising, challenging, and contextualizing those decisions. So 5 AI applications that are most likely to have a transformational impact over the next 5 to 10 years. Earlier, more accurate diagnosis, personalized and predictive medicine, AI co-pilots for clinicians and for patients, actually, virtual care, intelligent patient support, and also drug discovery and new treatments. And on that one, AI is already dramatically reducing the time needed to identify potential drug candidates. It predicts molecule behavior, optimizes clinical trials. What took us historically years can now increasingly be done in months. But it comes with risks. And if you're nodding along thinking, that's fine, Richard, but I'll believe it when I see it, you're not alone. And I'm often nodding along to myself, having the same conversation. I think it's really hard to conceptualize how significant a shift something like agentic AI, or as I said, definitely artificial general intelligence could be when we achieve it. Not just in healthcare, actually, but in every sector of our life. And I think, and this for me is the more important cultural piece, we're only at the beginning of starting to think, how is that going to disrupt our traditional working models and indeed our status as healthcare professionals or as lawyers or as architects? I interviewed a leading expert on AI in the workplace a couple of years ago on stage. And what struck me was he said that the Industrial Revolution was obviously a transformational impact for the working class. The means of production, the fact that we built factories, people came in from the countries, changing their working models, changing the way that they earned their living. But the professional classes were largely insulated from that. What the AI revolution does is it brings that kind of seismic disruption to the professional classes. Classes who have been able to use a hierarchy of language and knowledge to insulate themselves from further disruption will suddenly find that democratized through AI. And I don't think this is a replacement, but I think it significantly changes the types of roles, the types of actions that we will do to fulfill our job. And actually, when it comes to healthcare, I do fundamentally believe a lot of this will be about freeing up time to be with patients, the human-centered care that Claire talked about. That's my passion and belief, and I think if we get this right, that's the opportunity that's in front of us. I'm really lucky to sit on the National Commission for the Regulation of AI in Healthcare. It's an MHRA piece of work. That is genuinely a meeting that never fails to blow my mind. I'm not an expert in AI by any means, and I am running fast to keep up with that meeting. Just thinking about how you can design an AI regulatory system when the AI itself is capable of constantly changing and updating its own product. Agents within medical technologies, other AI devices, who are able to iterate at a speed that our regulatory framework has no hope of catching up with, or even sometimes understanding what's happening. Or when you're debating, as we often do, who is responsible for care in the future? Is it a human being or is it an AI agent? And I think there's a whole field of medical legal case law that needs to be written about that. These are really wicked problems to solve, but it's absolutely crucial that if we are going to deploy AI on the kind of scale that is potentially coming, that deployment has to be built on a foundation of safety, of ethics, and of trust. But also, and this is the economic growth point, we also have to recognize that we're not the only player in this space. And so the tension that I find really interesting in that room is the tension between speed and safety. And speed meaning our regulatory system, our ability to be attractive to global investment about where tech wants to bring their jobs and bring their investments. Because the way you describe it at the moment, Europe is slightly locked down, maybe slightly more bureaucratic, slow and cumbersome. The US feels a bit like the Wild West, if we're honest, for AI, and in many ways. There's probably a sweet spot somewhere in the middle that the UK may start to land upon. But we have to recognize that we have to balance risk, we have to balance safety with speed. We have to still be attractive to companies wanting to bring their investment, bring their jobs to this country, wanting to develop these kind of technologies within the UK so that we retain that investment, while at the same time making sure that our regulatory system is safe and by far the most important thing, trusted. Trusted by us, trusted by our patients, trusted by citizens as well. So it's a big debate. And the other thing that blows my mind, and I still can't get my head around this, in fact, I'll share two things. One is this piece around artificial general intelligence, which we haven't reached yet, but most experts would say we will get there by 2035 at the very latest. What an AI expert would say if they were in the room was artificial general intelligence will be better, smarter, more accurate, and safer than any doctor on the planet. I'm not saying whether I believe that statement or not, but that's the statement I keep constantly getting told. And what's fascinating to me, if that is true, is that we constantly design these systems with the safety net of the human in the loop. So when we talk about the regulatory systems needed to be able to drive AI, we're constantly saying, but as long as there's a human somewhere, checking, reading, validating, fine. What artificial general intelligence says is, if they're right, the human is the weak point. And I think that's really hard to get my head around. I'm not sure I believe it yet, but I thought I'd share it. But before I finish, you'll forgive me, and hopefully you will agree, that it's absolutely important that Yorkshire, God's own county, is one of the places where we build the future model of healthcare. So we don't just want to import great stuff from the rest of the country and certainly from the rest of the world. We want to build our future here in Yorkshire. And actually, we've got a rich and vibrant ecosystem right here, which I hope colleagues in the room will be very aware of. We've got, as we know, world-class universities. We've got over 600 life sciences companies, more than 27,000 people working in the sector. We're one of the most powerful concentrations of health innovation expertise in the UK. And actually, we've just soft-launched this prospectus with our 3 white rose mayors, so Oliver, Tracy, and David, which talks about why Yorkshire is a great place for health, tech, innovation, the future, life sciences to foster and to flourish. We'll do a proper launch on the 1st of August to celebrate Yorkshire Day, because I'm nothing if not looking for a good PR hook. But if you're quick on the QR code, you can see it on our website now. So I mentioned at the start that the opportunity in health innovation is not just about how we improve our health outcomes in our region, it's also about economic growth. And as a health innovation network, we did some work on this last year with a great company called Frontier Economics out of Manchester. And we demonstrated that if we really, really leaned into this, into the challenge of adopting what's already known, my point about great practice happens in pockets, we need it to have to happen everywhere, without inventing anything else. If this was business as usual for the NHS, we would be able to produce productivity growth through our reduction of or increase in health outcomes that's worth about £246 billion to the UK. That's about almost 10% of our UK's GDP, simply by adopting the opportunities that are out there already. There's actually another £32 billion that's available from the additional foreign direct investment, the FDI, into life sciences that would achieve as a result. My point about companies would come and invest, bring jobs, bring investment into our region if we really did this, if we were seen as an investable proposition by the rest of the world. If you really want to dive into the numbers, and I'm not sure I commend it or not, but there is a QR code there for that. But all I want you to take away, I guess, is this point, which is the NHS isn't just here to get people better. We're also here to act as a vital engine for UK economic growth. We keep people at work. We help people get back into work. It's a really important part of what we do, and it's a strong message to Treasury about why the NHS needs further investments so that we can really support the UK's productivity challenge. And a lot of that can be delivered through better adoption of health technology. So finally, how are we going to get there? So I mentioned at the start, I don't believe we have an invention problem. We have an adoption problem. I actually talk about my job being a culture job. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a techie. There's not much I am, actually. I'm a lot of knots, but I'm not much I am. But it's about giving people the confidence to do something differently tomorrow that they're not doing today. That's basically what we're talking about. That's behavioural change. That's culture. It's about people. It's also about stopping people from thinking that the answer is always to build rather than to steal with pride. We need to look down the road to find best practice. Sometimes it's in the next ward. It's not very far away. But we need to have the egoless curiosity to want to bring things in and implement and adapt. There's no point lifting and shifting. Things are always different. But what we can't do is allow not invented here to be the reason why we're saying no. We need to be able to shift things, adapt things, bring things in. It's really important, not just from a patient perspective, but from a taxpayer's perspective. We're spending £1.6 billion a year through our NIHR research body. We need to be able to find out what works, what's proven, and go and grab it and bring it in, rather than trying to build something new. So we did some work, again, as the Health Innovation Network last year or so to set out, so what are the conditions needed? Because this doesn't happen organically. We need to create the conditions to make sure that innovation can be successfully adopted. And this is my point about what is it we do now to be future ready. This is on our website, so you can Google it, the 7 conditions for successful innovation adoption. I just want to pick out two of the 7 that are my favorites. The first one, actually, and the last one. So the first one is, it says, think pathway, not product. And so what do we mean by that? Well, too often we make the mistake of just throwing technology into an existing pathway, effectively layering on additional costs. Nice, shiny widget, in it goes. We're surprised that it doesn't get embedded. We're surprised when the finance director is not very happy with us. It doesn't work. You've got to think fundamentally about how do you redesign care pathways, not just with one health technology, but a basket of innovation in all parts of that care pathway. That's how we disrupt fundamentally the model of care in a way that genuinely produces efficiencies and savings, and it makes a difference to patients. So think pathway, not product, would be my first recommendation. But the second and my final one, as I said, is the last one, is about staying with the implementation. We need to recognise we are addicted to pilots. We have more pilots in the NHS than British Airways. But often we use pilots as a way of saying a very, very slow no. And we know we're doing that. Implementation takes a long time. Often our funding is fragmented and short-term, and when the funding dries up, the pilot ends. We've got a plan for sustainable implementation from the outset. You've got to think about what needs to happen for this to become business as usual. As I said, that's more about the people than the product. We often focus on proving the business case or the value proposition of the technology itself, but we forget to think about what needs to happen to embed it so it becomes the way we do things around here. So when you're thinking about bringing in new ways of working, and not just tech, but any new ways of working or improvement, really focus on the implementation, the business as usual, changing the culture. Think to yourself, this thing doesn't happen in 3 months, 6 months. There is a long tail of implementation until something becomes the way we do things around here. The tech, actually, is often just the enabler. The culture is how we'll really get the benefits of all those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. A fantastic talk. I'm sure you'll all agree. I think the key points for me with the point around adoption that you've made really strikes a chord. And second, please, can we have a digital twin?
Yes.
As the scale we operate with our 0 to 19 services, we've probably got some really great data that could work together on that.
Fabulous.
In the interest of time, I think we'll try and limit the questions to a handful. Has anyone got a question? At the back, Claire's on it already.
Has anyone not got a question about AI?
Maybe. So I actually used chat whilst, so I could carry on listening whilst organising my thoughts. So how can patients be confident that their sensitive healthcare information remains private and secure when it's managed by private companies, especially worrying companies like Palantir? Are we going to have to just let go of our concept of privacy when we're using healthcare going forward?
Great question. No, not at all. I think there's a very long response to that. My short-term response is, politically, I think we have... Is this Chatham House rules? Let's say it is.
It is.
No, what I would say is, I think, to be honest, I don't care. This is a public statement, it's fine. Stick it on LinkedIn. Politically, I don't think we have taken enough notice of the ethics of the companies that we're working with. And I sense a massive shift as politicians are waking up to that, particularly through companies like Palantir. I would expect to see a step change in our procurement decisions around things like that. When it comes to patient data, I think we have to look to other sectors, particularly the banking industry. You know, for some reason we struggle to earn the trust of some of our citizens and our clinicians often about our stewardship of patient data. Other sectors don't have those kind of trials and tribulations. I think we need to learn from, back to this stealing with pride bit, we need to learn from others, and we need to also not just ask for trust at the moment that we need it. I think that's one of my big bugbears about the NHS at large is, you know, whether it's care.data or any other type of national rollout, we don't do enough to earn people's trust before we then say, would you mind signing your data up for here? And that societal conversation needs to happen a long time before we actually ask them to give us their trust.
Well, thank you, Richard. Who's next? Claire. Claire's got someone else at the back.
Hi. So my question is, with a world of opportunities available to HDFT, we need to make sure that we really prioritise the things that create the most value, and I use value in its broadest sense. So given the sheer volume of possibilities out there, what key criteria does health innovation look for when deciding which innovations to champion and scale?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the short version of that is, we don't set our priorities, our needs. You know, we set them through what the system needs, because there's no point me coming to you with a bag full of goodies on my shoulder, and you're saying that's not where our time is at the moment. And I think what I've seen, I've been doing this chief exec job for 10 years now, and what I've seen, of course, and I'm sure you'll all feel this, is the shrinking capacity that we have to implement. So our priorities have to be, you know, it's almost like priorities on top of priorities now. I think what's really interesting to go after is AI in non-clinical settings. That kind of, you know, I don't want to use the term back office, but certainly I talked about, you know, some of the examples I use here in terms of demand failure. So Rachel Power from the Patients Association, a good friend of mine, used this term the other day when I was on stage with her about demand failure. We often are seeing demand back into hospital because we failed patients, and they're then walking back in, often for non-clinical reasons. It's because the letter didn't arrive, they couldn't understand what it said, you know, text. It's all those kind of things where we could just be better. And if we were better, the patients wouldn't have to come and use our resource again. So for me, that's where I'd start. And I think that's almost like a Trojan horse of AI. If we start on non-clinical stuff, then we can build the clinical stuff later.
Great. Thank you, Richard. We have time for one more question. Ben.
Luckily, it's me then. Thank you. Richard, great presentation. Thank you very much. But I have just one overall question. How would you advise an NHS trust to strike the right balance between encouraging innovative and experimental with AI whilst maintaining the governance, control and safety requirements needed for the healthcare? We don't want to throw the doors open and create free for all, but equally we don't want to risk the governance processes and becoming so restrictive that people lose interest in it and feel like we can't move on.
Yeah, no, and exactly. And I think this is the point I was trying to make about the balance, the risk balance here, the risk appetite is absolutely critical. I would say my starting point is nobody should be trying to create these conditions or this governance environment by themselves. I think we all trusts, all NHS organisations, and actually indeed beyond the NHS are grappling with the same kind of notions about, you know, what's the right policy environment, what's the right safety, security, accountability. I think we need to do this together. So that's my first point, is back to my mantra about stealing with pride. Don't try and do this by yourself. But I suppose just recognise the risk that's inherent and recognise that risk is going to be differentially different for different use cases. So to my point about non-clinical AI, there may be a degree of risk appetite of a magnitude greater than something that's more, a clinical decision support tool, for example. So also recognise that you want to create the kind of environment where you have that sliding scale of risk, not just some kind of blanket statement on this is how we use AI.
Great. Thank you, Richard, and thank you. Sorry we don't have time for any more questions. We're going straight into the second breakout sessions now. So if you don't know where you are, we sent you all an email yesterday with your list. So we'll see you in the breakout. Thank you, Richard.
I'm going to tell everyone now. Right, everybody. Thank you all for coming back. I know it's taken a commitment to come back, so I'm really pleased you're all back here. And I've got the great privilege of announcing our next speaker, who is Fiona Rogers, and she's Assistant Director of Nursing Programmes for the Queen's Institute of Community Nursing. So I'm sure you're going to give her a great welcome, and we'll take some questions after she's done her presentation.
Thank you, Breda. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today and to join in the celebrations. My presentation today is about community nursing, talking about surviving to thriving. And when I'm talking about community nursing, I'm talking about all nursing in the community, including primary care, so basically outside of the hospital setting. But I thought it might be quite nice just to say a little bit about me to begin with, because Harrogate is actually a very special place to me personally. I'm actually here representing our CEO, Steph Lawrence, who was unable to come today. And she asked the nursing team at the QICN, oh, can anybody go to Harrogate on the 1st of July? And I was like, oh, maybe. And you'll see why. The photo in the middle you can see there is the Harrogate School of Nursing badge, because that's where I trained. I qualified in Harrogate in 1980. Gosh, it feels so long ago. And there's just some photographs there of my career. I'm really proud, as you can see one of the pictures there, about being a Queen's nurse, and I was one of the first nurses in Harrogate to receive the Queen's nurse title. I worked within the hospital in orthopaedics. I moved into special care, but then the majority of my career at HDFT and beyond was in children's services and working in the 0 to 19 service as a qualified school nurse. The pink picture is me receiving my Queen's nurse title by the then Chief Nurse of Wales. And the pictures at the bottom are some of the more recent pictures. So part of my role is to support nurses, community nurses with innovation projects. And we're really lucky to be funded by the National Garden Scheme, which I'll share a little bit more about, who are passionate about supporting health and care charities. So we support 5 nurses every year with a scholarship to create a garden or a gardening project that improves the health and well-being outcomes for the population they serve, or also for nurses as well. And this is our current cohort, and we've actually got a nurse from North Yorkshire at RAF Leeming who's actually creating a garden to support mental health of the military personnel and their families. The top picture there with the castle, I don't know if you recognise, that is Windsor Castle. I'm also the carers champion, and I'm absolutely passionate about supporting unpaid carers of all ages, particularly young carers. And myself and those 3 nurses there, 2 of whom are school nurses, one is a health visitor, we were invited to Windsor Castle early in the year to meet the King and Queen about the work we do supporting carers. So I'm a bit nervous, my voice is a bit croaky, I apologise. And the bottom picture, again, co-production is really dear to me, and this is with 2 school nurses and 2 adult young carers at the International Young Carers Conference, ensuring that the voice of the population we serve is heard loud and clear. I'm proud to be a member of the RCN, Children, Young and People's Forum, also School and Public Health Nurse Association, and carrying on the carers theme, I'm a trustee at our local carers resource here. Thank you. So I'm going to begin just telling you a little story about the Queen's nurse Clematis. You can see there 3 nurses who work in Guernsey, and there was actually 4 of them, but the 4th one couldn't be there on this day. And 10 years ago, they had an idea. They wanted to promote community nursing where they lived, and they all work and live on the island of Guernsey. So they thought to themselves, what could we do that would interest people? How could we get people interested in community nursing? What could we do? And they came up with the idea to create a flower. I know, a bit random, but to come up with a flower. So they approached one of the local clematis growers on the island of Guernsey, and he said, well, do you know what? That's a really good idea. But actually, we don't have any representation for the National Garden Scheme here, and you'll see the link a little bit later. So he challenged those 3 community nurses to set up a National Garden Scheme in Guernsey, where people would open their gardens for a small fee and that money would then be ploughed back into health and care services. It took 10 years for this to come to life. And the picture in the middle is the clematis being launched at Chelsea Flower Show this year. And those three nurses, they showed through that day what personifies for community nursing to me. They showed innovation, they showed resilience, they showed determination, and they were resourceful. They also were quite financially savvy because for every clematis that's sold, the QICN gets £2. So that's nursing for you, always thinking of the money as well. They had to work in collaboration. They had to work with teamwork. So to me, they really personified what community nursing is all about. They also did get shortlisted for Flower of the Year. Sadly, they came second, but what a great accolade for those nurses. So why is community nursing unique? Community nurses lead and deliver nursing care in settings outside the hospital. And they lead and deliver to all populations, wherever people live, wherever people call home. They combine their clinical expertise with understandings of intersectionalities of the home, the families, the communities, the society that they live in. They also deliver holistic care, thinking of those families, thinking of where they live, who else is involved in their care. And the relationships for community nurses, they can be momentary to lifelong. It could be a chance meeting with somebody experiencing homelessness, or to being a general practice nurse and following somebody through the life course. And they also work autonomously. They don't have somebody across the corridor to call for help. They can't just quickly call somebody. The QICN created a poster demonstrating how community nurses genuinely do touch the lives for people right across the lifespan. And you can see there right through from preconception, pregnancy, babies, toddlers, etc., right through to the older person, how community nurses touch the lives, as I say, across the lifespan. And they could be community staff nurses, they could be more advanced practitioners, but right across the lifespan, many nurses are working. There's also, as you can see down the side, there's those nurses who work at every stage of the life course as well. It could be those community clinical nurse specialists, could be district nurses, could be hospice nurses. So community nurses are everywhere. So I mentioned that I work for the Queen's Institute of Community Nursing. So after Harrogate, I moved on to North Yorkshire CCG, into commissioning, children's commissioning. I then made the bold move of moving to West Yorkshire, which at the time I thought was a really big move. Having worked in North Yorkshire for over 30 years, it felt a huge move going to West Yorkshire. And I worked there as a young carers project manager, which is probably where I got my passion for working with young carers. But then also became the unpaid carer programme manager. And I did that prior to going to the Queen's Institute of Community Nursing. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of the QICN, as it's called. And William Rathbone was a Welsh philanthropist, and his wife was ill and was at home. And he wasn't able to care for her on his own. So he actually paid somebody to provide nursing care, and she cared for her until she died. He realised then that many people in Liverpool actually couldn't access nursing care, and he wanted to do something about this. So he actually paid, and she was called Mary Robinson, he actually paid her, and he trained her. And she was the country's first district nurse, as we know, the first nurse working in the community. But he also wanted actually to do something more tangible. So he actually developed the first training programme. And he funded Mary to be this first district nurse, caring for sick people at home, providing skilled care by nurses, teaching families how to care for their loved ones, promoting cleanliness, hygiene, and preventing disease. And this demonstrated that there were reduced hospital admissions and improved health and well-being. Quite topical for today as well, isn't it? And he demonstrated this, and he worked with Florence Nightingale to develop the first district nursing training model. The QNI was then created in 1887, and it was originally called the Queen Victoria's Jubilee Institute for Nurses, with Queen Victoria as the first royal patron. And we still do have the Queen as our patron. We had Elizabeth II, obviously, for many years, and we've now Queen Camilla is now our patron. And the name of the institute was changed to the Queen's Institute for District Nursing in 1928. And when nurses qualified and they'd done the training, that's when they became a Queen's nurse. That's where the title first came from. In 1973, the name was changed to the Queen's Nursing Institute. And more recently, in 2025, the Queen's Institute of Community Nursing became the name of the institute. We were forever saying, who do you work for? Q&I, what do you do? Q&I, what does it do? Obviously, they knew it was about nursing, but we really wanted to make sure that everybody knew it was about community nursing, which is what we are all about. The Queen's Nurse title, when the district nursing was changed, when it was no longer created and supplied by the Queen's Institute of District Nursing, the Queen's Nurse title lay dormant. And again in the 70s, the Q&I then decided, let's relaunch the title and actually let's celebrate what community nurses do. And that's all community nurses. So it did used to be district nurses, but this was about health visitors, school nurses, health and justice nurses, prison nurses, sexual health nurses, everybody, nurses who work in the community. And the Queen's the Queen's Nurse title, was then back into being able to be applied for. We've now got 3,500 Queen's nurses across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Scotland has its own institute, so it's Wales, England and Northern Ireland. And every year we open to applications for nurses who've worked in the community for a consecutive 5 years. And here's a few pictures of those early Queen's nurses, obviously working in the community with their children and their families. I also mentioned the National Garden Scheme. And the National Garden Scheme is again really dear to the QICN. And Elsie Wagg was also a friend of William Rathbone. And she actually thought, well, how are we going to fund this district nurse training? What are we going to do? Who's going to pay for it? So she had an idea that if people open their garden for £1, that could then pay towards the district nurse training. And that was in 1926. If we fast forward to 2026, there are over nearly 3,500 gardens that open for the National Garden Scheme. From the initial £6,000 that was raised that first year, last year over £3.5 million was donated to health and care charities. And you may be aware of lots of these charities: Macmillan, Marie Curie, Hospice UK, Carers Trust, Parkinson's UK and ourselves. We have remained their biggest benefactor over the years, and as you can see there, £450,000 was what we received last year. And there are plenty of gardens here in Yorkshire. There's gardens that are historical gardens, there's dog-friendly gardens, and obviously child-friendly gardens too. And I would recommend, when you see those yellow signs saying National Garden Scheme, I'll be honest, before I worked for the QICN, I didn't know what they did, and I didn't know that they were supporting so many health and care charities that touch many of us, many of our hearts. So why is community nursing unique? Because we believe it's an expert, relationship-led, all-age care delivered where people live, wherever they call their home. And it's across homes, families and communities. It's that care that's delivered beyond the hospital wards and reaching all populations. It's holistic clinical judgment, and the expertise is combined with that real insight into those homes, into those families, and those communities in the wider society. Nurses often have those autonomous relationships, and they work independently, and they build trust from often a brief encounter, and as I said earlier, through to that lifelong support. And that unique blend of clinical expertise, independence, and trusting relationship in everyday community settings. But why is it important? It's important because community nurses offer a safety-critical service. They make autonomous decision-making. More and more children, young people, families and older people are living in the community with complex needs, and we know that this is increasing. We often have very unpredictable environments, and nurses in the community are there for that early detection. Often medicines management, and more often safeguarding as well, right across the life course. And we know how vulnerable some of the society are. They have a key role in infection prevention in society, and also that coordination and collaboration, and working in partnership in the new neighbourhood models. And also being able to work alone. Many Queen's nurses and community nurses as a whole are used to working alone. So it's vital, as we say, it's important and it's vital, because they're often that first person identifying risk early, preventing a crisis and protecting vulnerable people of all ages. Their autonomous judgment can help spot deterioration, safeguarding concerns and safety issues before they escalate. And caring in complexity, and we know that's increasing. Managing the complex needs, including the medicines management, infection prevention, and often unpredictable home environments. And they connect as well as protect. Connecting services, coordinating responses, and helping prevent harm for people and families. So the community nursing is built on clinical expertise, autonomy, and that trusted action in the places where people live. So what are the conditions to thrive, for community nurses to thrive? Safe staffing with a manageable workload. We know that the numbers of district nurses, health visitors, school nurses, all those numbers are declining. And at the QICN, we're doing our very best to keep promoting that we need more. If we're going to have the shift from hospital to community, we need to have the workforce there to deliver the care. It sounds quite simple, doesn't it? But we know that those numbers are reducing. There needs to be an inclusive workplace with compassionate leadership, and I know that was spoken about earlier, wasn't it? A culture of respect, inclusion, and psychological safety. And professional autonomy and trust. And nurses having that empowerment to make decisions. But community nurses also need to access education and career development. And HDFT is an organisational member of the QICN and does access some of the courses that we run. We do provide professional development for nurses and allied health professionals. They need resources and technology, and we had the discussion about technology earlier. But we know many nurses, actually, their mobile phone, they don't get signal where they're working. So AI is fantastic, but a lot of district nurses say, well, give us a phone that works. So, yeah. Collaborative working, as I say, absolutely key. Nurses, they might be autonomous workers, but they actually work within the wider system. And also nurses need recognition and value about what they're doing. So at the QICN, and I'm not going to go through all of this, you'll be delighted to hear, but just to show you, our strategic plan is looking to the future. And Breda, when she asked about this presentation, said, can you do a bit about the past, but also the present and moving forward? So our strategic plan, as you can see there, we'll just concentrate on our priorities. Our priorities are to influence policy and development. So the QICN represents the voice of community nurses, attending many parliamentary groups, contributing towards many strategies, whether it's Department of Health and Social Care, the NHS. We also, with data and evidence, we know we have to demonstrate the impact. We know we need to demonstrate the outcome. What difference do we make as community nurses? And innovation and quality improvement, and we had that, again, discussion earlier, didn't we, about innovation. Also being role models and leaders, and a lot of our leadership courses are about encouraging nurses, community nurses, to be able to articulate their worth, explain what they do, what difference do they make. And then also having the support for nurses. That's all been a long-standing arm of the QICN, is that they support retired Queen's nurses. And lastly, financial stability. Obviously, we're a charity. As you'll be aware, funding streams have changed over recent years. So we have to branch out as well in terms of our organisational membership is something that's only been around, I think, for about 2 years. But we now have over 60 trusts and organisations who are organisational members. So what do? We talk about awareness, advocacy and action for the future. We're promoting the critical role of community nurses within neighbourhood teams and the neighbourhood model. We know there needs to be a workforce plan to deliver their 10-year ambitions. We host many roundtables, including general practice nurses, research and district nurses. And today, my colleague is actually at the RCN talking about care not done. We know in hospitals there's lots of data about things that aren't done. But in the community, who actually records when a visit is delayed? Who records when there's been a reprioritation of services? So we're very keen, and at the RCN today, there is a roundtable on care not done. Steph Lawrence, our CEO, is working very hard to get an all-party parliamentary group, an APPG, specifically for nursing, as there isn't one at the moment, and actually have that influencing at policy level. Also working very hard to keep level 7 apprenticeships, because we know that if people are going into nursing or into some of the allied health professions, actually that they need that level 7. I said earlier about development of community nurse leaders as political influencers. We have to influence policy to make change. But also there needs to be opportunities for skilled, innovative workforce. So what does the future look like? The future care can only shift to the home if there's that long-term commitment to investment to ensure that all community nursing is sustainable, visible and valued. We want people to make it a career of choice. We know that there used to be the thing, oh, you need to work in a hospital before you go to the community. Why? Why do you need to do that? So we want to showcase community nursing early. We also want to create placements and preceptorships and clear pathways for people who want to work in the community. But we also need to make sure that that work is sustainable. We need to fund safe staffing and manageable caseloads. We know many health visitors around the country have way too high caseloads. And we also need, as I said, to give teams the right technology and support to do the job they want to do. And making nurses feel valued. We want to back compassionate leadership and inclusion. We need to listen, recognise and act on their feedback. And I want to just finish with the picture of the clematis. Because we know, if we go back to those 3 nurses at the beginning, to thrive in community nursing, we believe you need to work with passion to do what you do best, work with persistence to overcome the challenges, and work in partnership with the populations you serve and the people you work with. And together we can achieve more than what none of us can do alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, somebody's trying to take a picture of your website and I'm in the way. You don't want my mug in the way. So we've got a time for a couple of questions. And I didn't know that about the open gardens. So maybe everyone else did, but I didn't. It was really interesting. Anybody got any questions? Oh, gosh, a few hands gone up. I'm going to run to you with the mic because I haven't got a runner.
Thanks, Breda. Mine's more of a reflection. So I really liked the piece about the Guernsey nurses and the flower, and it really made me think about, there's a saying, I don't know if many of you know it, but there's something about planting a seed but not enduring or enjoying the fruits of the seed. Yeah. And actually throughout your presentation and parts of today as well, it's thinking about not only what's done now and today and as an individual and in your individual roles, but the impact of that and how we drive forward to a place with where we want to be and where we want to get to. And that really showcased and was a golden thread throughout your presentation, and it really resonated with me in that way, so I just wanted to share that. But
great,
thank you for a lovely
and
presentation.
I tried really hard not to do all the from seed to growth and all those things, because there's so many, isn't that you can do, make sure the environment's right, etc. But I genuinely believe that those nurses and my manager who was on the photo with them, when they were at the Chelsea Flower Show, they were there for 3 days, and the media day obviously is when all the stars go, and apparently they were just every single star, come and meet us. Queen Camilla, they presented her with the clematis. So yeah, no, I agree, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks. And we've got a question at the back. Yeah.
Hi, I was a community nurse for many years and left because, and I feel guilty about this, I felt helpless. It went from being a proactive role to a very much reactive role, and we were firefighting and you couldn't do what you'd trained to do. And then I realised I'm the problem, because if people like me are leaving and everyone's going in and feeling this way, what do we do about that? How do we actually help these families we care so much about with limited resources?
So I think it's a question about how do we help families with limited resources?
I have a hearing impairment, sorry.
Yes. So it's how we help communities, but as nurses we've limited resources. Okay.
And that's exactly what we hear all the time. Like I said, the number of district nurses leaving the profession is huge. The number of health visitors is huge. The number of school nurses is huge. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to speak with the other nursing professional bodies as well as government about that safety critical role of community nursing, is that we also need people to want to work in the profession, so we have to make it attractive. We have to, people, if you ask people what does a school nurse do, for example, they probably couldn't tell you what a school nurse nowadays does. Or some of the job descriptions that I showed you on the lifespan. We have so many different job descriptions that people actually don't know, but we need to make it an attractive place to be. But we also need to pay people to be there, and we know that from certainly within the community, many nurses remain a band 5, and that's the level that people are paid when they qualify, for those who don't know. So what other professions would somebody stay at that level of pay for possibly 10, 20 years when they grow in experience? So there is lots of work going on behind the scenes, because we know that this shift won't happen if the workforce isn't there.
Okay, probably got time for one more, if anybody. Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona, for your talk, and it's really great to hear that how we can support community nurses there, because I'm guessing, how do we encourage us to see a team NHS with the community out from the hospital? Because I think sometimes there can feel a little bit of a hierarchy. And what can we do to try and dispel that and see? Because my experience of community nurses is they work autonomously, and I've been in patients' homes, and quite frankly, it's very different to a nice ward. So it's really tricky job. Yeah. What can we do within the trust to enable that?
I think what we do again is we actually showcase what community nurses do. We demonstrate that they are a safety critical profession. We demonstrate what would happen if community nurses weren't there. What would happen if we didn't have that community nurse, didn't go and do that visit? What if that check wasn't done, that observation wasn't done, for example? And we know that it's very much, we have heard with the shift, we have heard that some of the hospital trusts are just going to have an outreach team. So rather than having a whole community service, which I know you do have here, but some of the other trusts around the country, they're looking at, well, how can we actually sort of just stretch our hospital service to have a bit of an outreach team? So I think it's twofold, really. I think it's those people recognising what those community nurses do. And I think also it's the other way that about the community nurses, which is what we're trying to do, is that they're actually able to articulate what they do and the difference that they make.
Thank you. So thanks again to Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Great presentation. Hand it over to Liz.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Liz Audsley. I'm Associate Director of Allied Health Professionals at HDFT, and I'm going to introduce Steve Tolan. Unfortunately, Steve can't be here today, although I do know he did want to be here and he got pulled into something NHS England. So Steve is the Deputy Chief Allied Health Professionals Officer for the national team at NHS England. He's a physiotherapist by background. He has worked for a lot of his career in the London area, and he was the Regional Chief AHP in London and helped set up the Capital AHP programme several years ago. He has strong links to Harrogate. He's visited us on several occasions before. He has family links to HDFT, both in terms of service users and members of the workforce. So I know he's disappointed that he couldn't attend, so he's done a little video for us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be joining you, albeit virtually, for what is a remarkable milestone, 200 years of Harrogate District Foundation Trust. My name is Steve Tolan, and I'm the Deputy Chief Allied Health Professions Officer at NHS England. Firstly, I want to say thank you to Liz for the kind invitation to be part of today. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person, but I'm pleased to have the opportunity to contribute to your celebration. Some of you will know that Harrogate is like a second home for me. I've got family who live here and have been patients in Harrogate, and others who've contributed to health and care services. I've also personally had the chance to visit AHP services in Harrogate and take part in some of your previous events. A bicentenary is no small achievement. It represents not just longevity, but sustained commitment. Commitment to patients, to communities, and to one another as colleagues. It speaks to the enduring values of the NHS, and importantly, to the people in this room and beyond who bring those values to life every day. Now, I know that throughout the course of the day you will have heard and will continue to hear about some of the real and very pressing challenges the NHS is facing, whether that's rising demands, workforce pressures, health inequalities, financial constraints, or the ongoing impact of recovery and reform. And so I'm not going to dwell on those too long. Instead, I'd like to briefly highlight how AHPs working alongside our nursing, medical and wider colleagues are well positioned to be part of the solution. After all, AHPs in the UK have long established world-leading scope of practice. And most of our AHPs were founded in the UK. They're innovation in themselves. AHPs are central to delivering more preventative, personalised and community-based care. Every day across England, we see AHPs supporting early interventions to prevent hospital admissions, whether that's physios helping people to stay strong and mobile, or OTs enabling living at home safely. Leading rehab pathways that reduce length of stay and improving outcomes after acute episodes. Transforming models of care like radiographers embracing new technologies such as AI, dietitians managing long-term conditions, or paramedics delivering care in general practice. And critically, working across organisational boundaries to integrate care around the person, not the system. This isn't about AHP working in isolation, it's about MDT leadership and collaboration. It's about AHPs, nurses, doctors and others coming together with a shared purpose to redesign services in ways that meet the needs of today's population. At a national level, we're working to support and enable that contribution. So I'd like to briefly introduce three areas of work that I think are particularly important. First, the development of a new national AHP framework, currently out for consultation, led by the Office of the Chief AHP Officer. This represents the third strategic framework and will continue our strategic trajectory by evolution, not revolution. So much progress has been made since the foundation of our first strategy, AHPs into Action. But we see policy and practice continue to evolve. For example, at the foundation of our current strategy, AHPs Deliver, AI wasn't a significant conversation. Now, AI has a driving role in many areas of our life and into how we develop our practice and support our communities. So this framework aims to set out a clear, collective, contemporary direction for AHP workforce under 6 key themes: providing safe, high quality and accessible care, data, digital and technology, research, improvement and innovation, keeping people healthy, people and the AHP workforce, and working differently. What sits behind these themes is a recognition that AHPs are not just delivering services, they're shaping the future of care. The framework will be about clarity of purpose, but also empowerment, ensuring AHPs have the support, skills and leadership opportunities to contribute at every level, including, importantly, support workers. I'd strongly encourage you all to engage with that consultation if you haven't already. Your voices, particularly at a place with such a rich history of service innovation of Harrogate, are essential in shaping what comes next. And we really also need to hear from our wider multidisciplinary colleagues. We need our friends in other professions to help us see the wood for the trees. Secondly, I want to touch on safer staffing. We're currently developing a new improvement guidance specifically for AHP safer staffing. Importantly, this isn't about introducing fixed staffing ratios because, simply put, the evidence base isn't strong enough to support that across the diverse AHP workforce. Instead, what we're doing is to provide a set of guiding principles for systems and organisations, principles that help leaders to understand demand and complexity in a structured way, assess the impact of workforce decisions on quality and outcomes, use data and professional judgment together, not in isolation, and ultimately build a more systematic and transparent approach to determining AHP staffing needs. This is about moving the conversation forward towards a more mature, evidence-informed approach that recognises the breadth and diversity of AHP practice. And this will be a platform on which we then need our research community to be thinking about some of those deeper questions around quality and safety in AHP practice and the relationship with staffing. Third, I want to highlight something that I know many of you will be actively engaged in already, quality improvement. Across the country, AHPs are leading exceptional QI work. I see it every time I do visits. I see it when I attend conferences and events and the posters that often are along the walls of organisations that I visit. These improve pathways, redesign services, and enhance patient experience. But one of the national challenges is how much of that work remains locally held and not formally shared. We need to bridge the gap between quality improvement and formal research. This means creating the conditions and building the confidence for our QI community to publish, to evaluate, and to contribute to the wider evidence base. Because if we don't capture and share that learning, we miss the opportunity to scale that work. This isn't about turning everyone into an academic researcher. It's about recognizing that the work that you're already doing matters and ensuring it has the impact it deserves beyond your immediate setting, including internationally. So as you reflect on today, on 200 years of service, innovation and care, I'd encourage you to think about what the next chapter looks like. How do we as AHPs continue to evolve? How do we work differently across professional boundaries? How do we ensure that the contribution of AHPs, and indeed all professions, is fully realised? Because there's one thing we know, it's that the future of the NHS will be built on collaboration, on innovation, and on the leadership that exists at every level of the workforce. Finally, I want to wish you all a fantastic day. I hope you have the opportunity to just not look back with pride, but to look forward with ambition. Thanks for all that you do, for your patients, for your communities, and for the wider healthcare system here in Harrogate. And once again, congratulations on reaching this extraordinary milestone. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pass on your congratulations and your applause to Steve. I'm now going to hand over to Sarah, who is going to, I think, announce some winners. Is that correct?
That is indeed one of my tasks. As always, I get the best jobs. So hello everyone in the room, hello everyone elsewhere who is watching us. Now, I feel I need to acknowledge something really important. There's a small sporting event taking place pretty soon that a few of you might be interested in. And because of that, I've been given strict instructions not to waffle, to do this job quickly and effectively. However, I need your help. So I'm going to make you a deal. If I feel that you are giving the right level of support, being vocal, being appreciative, generally noisy all round, as we go through the poster, entries, etc., it will go quickly. If you're not, it won't. And for those of you that know me really well, I can talk. So, do you accept the deal? All right, this is going to go well. So, thank you very much for your participation. Starting with the poster competition results. We had 58 entries. Yeah. Yep, that's it. And they were all really high quality. It absolutely shows the depth and the breadth of improvement work going across the whole of HDFT. So it made it incredibly difficult to pick the top three. So we used a very strict criteria. Number one, clarity. Number two, impact. And number three, scalability, which helped us choose our winners. Now, if you are in the room when I call your name, I expect you to run to this stage. Yes. Amidst a massive cheer, applause, and lots of stamping of feet, we are going to present you with something. You are going to have a photograph taken. And again, I reiterate, if you do it quickly, won't be as painful, because I know these things can be a little embarrassing. So in first place, ID 39 for the Bowel Cancer Screening Programme, Claire Whitehead! Woo! Congratulations. You have a whole goodie bag, and here is your photo. More applause. Well done. In second place, ID5 Social Values Case, Dave Forrest. Yay! Massive. Congratulations. And I loved the running. Thank you very much indeed. Now, third place, I know this person isn't in the room because he's on night shifts. So I know. So we have a stand-in. And I think it's only fair that Jackie gets to accept this on his behalf. But I want to reassure him that we absolutely will get that bag to you, and we will do this for him in person, because why would he want to miss out on this? So, third and final place goes to ID 26 for blood pressure monitoring in rheumatology outpatients clinic. And it's, yay, Dr. Naveen Viyakamura. Yes. I love the fact we both share in that. That is brilliant. My second of three tasks are thank yous, and there are a ton of these. As I call out these names, if you're in the room, I expect you to show yourself. I expect a big arm raise so that we can celebrate you in the room. These things do not happen without a lot of time, energy, and effort. And I know you'll agree it has been a fantastic, fantastic day. So first of all, top of the list is the Conference Organising Committee, made up of Giles Latham, Stephen Jammoos, Kate Southgate, Leanne Hutchinson, Claire Harding, Yvonne Campbell, Nikki Langdale, Jenny Nolan, Natalie Jackson, Amanda Smith, Jane Taylor, Emily Reid, I'm still going, Tim Wilkinson, Verity Chesham, Liz Audley, and Lucinda Taylor. Yay! It takes a team. Now, also some very special mentions for people who have had comfy shoes on today and have been running around doing a whole range of things. Laura DeFern, Mariana Coro, Jane Taylor, Rachel Hewson, all from our corporate team, who I know you will agree have been a huge help today and will need a foot bath later on. Podiatry colleagues, feel free to support them. Now, in addition, we've had lots of colleagues who have organised a department stand for today to really showcase their work. And also to the teams who've arranged for fantastic demonstrations of stuff. I hope you've all experienced our surgical robots. Apparently, I'm now a surgeon. Apparently, yes. So this has taken an extraordinary amount of effort. So if you were one of those teams, give yourselves a big round of applause. In addition, there were lots of colleagues, and not just HDFT colleagues, but our brilliant partners who we work with, who have been part of speaking either on this stage or have been in the workshops. Once again, this takes time and energy. You can't just turn up and just have a chat. It takes a lot of effort to do this. So I'd like a huge thank you for everybody who was brave enough to do that. And I really, really, really want to thank two of our funders, who I know are also in the room, for their financial support for this event. We absolutely could not have done this without them. It makes such a difference, and it is the difference between doing it and not doing it. So, a massive cheer and a big round of applause to Nerve Centre. And to our Harrogate Hospital and Community Charity. Thank you, as always, for that. I only have about 51 more thank yous to do. Nearly there. Now, we have a huge special thanks to somebody who couldn't be with us today, but who has been working with Jackie for many months. And inconveniently, she had a baby. So she's at home with baby and isn't able to see the fruits of this particular labour. Did you see what I did there? But if you're watching, Jez Lumley, this is for you. And also Helen Walmsley. Yay! That's it. Come on down. Now, when Jez had this huge live event happen, this is the person who stepped in and said, go on, I'll take it over. And honestly, we are so grateful. Now, Jackie Andrews, before you get off this stage, this is where she'll kill me later. This has been her absolute championing of this for a very, very long time. Not for the whole 200 years of celebration, but a very, it feels like it, but a very, very long time. And she absolutely made sure this was going to happen, found a way to make it happen, and had the vision for being able to celebrate our past, understand our present, and plan for the future. Jackie Andrews, this is for you. Woo! So, finally, thank you all for being in the room. For those that joined digitally, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your engagement. We have a lot to do, and I always feel really confident when we have things like this, that I know it stimulates your best thinking, your ideas, your creativity going forward. So I genuinely want to say thank you for spending time on this. I have one final request. The survey about your experience of today will land in your inbox tomorrow. I need you all to promise me that you're going to fill it in. Yeah, no, I think that needs to be a bit louder. Oh, yeah, okay, because I'm going to come looking for you if you haven't filled it in. So, this is the end of our very special conference. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy journeys home.